subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
With all the brouhaha around the Citizenship Amendment Act, NRC, NPR, the violence in Jamia, the violence in JNU, somewhere down the line, discourse around India's sinking economy got lost. However, now latest numbers tell us that India is expected to grow at an 11-year low of 5% this fiscal. What does this mean? What are these numbers and what can the government do to address the situation? That's what we're going to look at in Government Matters today. Ramya Nair, who tracks the economy, is in the studio with me. Ramya, you're back after a long time. As I mentioned, so much took over and I'm pretty sure the government is fairly happy that attention was taken away from the economy. But, what are these numbers, the first advanced estimates that have come out? What do they tell us?
So the first advanced estimates, basically assess how the economy will grow in the year 2019-20, and it's based on the data that has come in for the first 6-8 months.
Right.
So it's a kind of an extrapolation of the existing numbers. So hence, it's bound to be revised later going forward. But as of now, the National Statistical Office says that the Indian economy will grow at 5%. So that's an 11-year low. The last time we saw such numbers were in the year 2008-9.
When the recession was...
Yeah, when there was a global economic crisis. So at that time, we had grown at 3.1%. So we have, never seen growth levels at this low levels for the last 11 years. So that's one point. The data also tells us that, this is the third consecutive year of a slowing growth that the Narendra Modi government will see.
Right.
So it will be a challenge for the government to now again, probably change the discourse. Again,
right. Now, so Ramya, I'll come back to that a little later, but what does the data tell us about various sectors, the performance of manufacturing, agriculture, etc.?
So the data is talking about how manufacturing will grow at only 2%. That's a really low growth.
Right.
Agriculture would grow at 2.8%. So that's, on expected lines. More worryingly, the gross fixed capital formation, that's an indicator of the investment demand in the economy. That's going to grow at less than 1%. So these are factors that are really of concern. Even when it comes to private final consumption expenditure or the consumption expenditure incurred by households, that's going to grow at less than 6%, around 5.7%. So what the economy right now is being propped up by is government spending.
Right.
So government spending is growing at 10%, which is much more than what the government spending in last year also. So, that's what is propping up the economy at the moment.
Right.
Especially when, at the time when both investment and private consumption is slowing down sharply.
Right. Now, Ramya, given that the union budget is now due in less than a month on the 1st of February, this would sort of put pressure on the government to devise a budget that can perhaps give the economy a little bit of a spur. What is expected in the budget?
So, given these numbers, the economists do expect the budget to have many growth-promoting policies. It will be a fiscal expansionary budget, is what the economists are saying. But it remains to be seen what actually Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman presents in her budget. But there is an urgent need to, increase government spending to push growth and to announce steps to revive private investment and to revive consumption. So there's a lot of talk on how, probably income tax slabs could be relaxed and there could be more spending power in the hands of the people. But it remains to be seen what exactly will the FM announce.
Right. But after the last union budget, which happened once this government, resumed its second term, there were steps that were taken to roll back a lot of decisions and to perhaps give a bit of an impetus to private spending, to private investment. So can we just recap that a little bit?
So the government announced corporate tax cuts, making corporate tax rates more competitive when it compares to other South Asian economies. So, it was pegged as this that the government will take a 1.45 lakh crore hit because of these measures. But the impact of these announcements have not been seen yet, and also companies have a few more years to decide on their investment decisions if they want to avail the lower tax rates. So per se, there's a lot of talk probably, but no concrete investment proposals have really been implemented by companies. So I think companies are also adopting a wait-and-watch approach, especially given that consumption is not picking up. So why will you go and invest in new manufacturing facilities when your existing the production of your existing manufacturing facilities, you're not being able to sell that?
So I'll ask you a slightly layperson question, Ramya, because this is not my area of expertise at all. But when you're saying that government spending is what is propping up what's helping the economy, where does that leave the fiscal deficit?
The fiscal deficit as of now, the fiscal deficit as a percentage of GDP is calculated based on nominal GDP numbers. So the government had estimated that nominal GDP will grow at 12% when they had presented the budget in 1920. So what the current numbers, the National Statistical Office of Numbers tell us that the nominal GDP will grow at only 7.5%. So just based on that calculation, the fiscal deficit is likely to be 3.44% against the 3.3% that they had targeted in the budget. Besides that, then there's also fiscal slippage. Tax collections have not been growing; they've been really much below targets. So fiscal deficit is expected to be more than 3.8% is what economists are pegging the fiscal deficit to be in the current fiscal.
Right.
So obviously it does put constraints on the level of the government can spend also, because if the revenues are not coming in, then how much can they spend? There's also this whole uncertainty over disinvestment proceeds. So there's the possibility of the government's big ticket disinvestments like Air India and BPCL,
through which they're hoping to raise revenue.
Going through this fiscal is like really low. So there is this constraint on the revenue side and the pressure to increase expenditure.
Right.
Yeah. So it's a tightrope walk for the finance minister. Yeah.
Right. Ramya, I know there are no easy answers to this, but what has caused this? Why is the Indian economy looking so bad?
It's a culmination of factors, and many economists would probably talk about on how it's probably because of the whole impact of demonetization followed by GST, and how it is now the spillover effects are now being visible. As of now, it's mainly on the fact that private companies are not investing. People are probably saving, not spending because they're uncertain about where the future leads them. It's also on the whole job scenario, right? So the job scenario doesn't look really good. We have a lot of anecdotal evidence on how many companies have retrenched workers, especially manufacturing units. So also, the numbers don't favor, the whole job-intensive sector as much. So manufacturing has grown by only around 2%, versus 6.9% last year.
That's a huge drop.
That's a huge drop. Construction again has grown at 3.2% versus 8.7% last year. So these are, your job-intensive sectors which are not doing really well. So there is this fear also among the people probably of what the future entails. So all of these factors and the whole sentiment probably is why we are here right now.
The economy is not just about the economy. It's a big political question as well for any party in power. The BJP has always attacked the UPA for what it called policy paralysis, for what it called sinking economy, and look at what's happening now. But somewhere down the line, this government will have to take corrective measures. It has to go to elections every year in many states and finally in 2024. Particularly the middle class, it would want to target, I'm assuming, given that there's a lot of pinch being felt there. Is there anything expected on that front?
Specifically middle class, probably an income tax, personal income tax relief, some adjustment of slabs to ensure that the income in the hands of the people increases. So that could be one middle class really. But this government, except for probably the previous budget, has not really been very middle class friendly. The steps that have been taken have been probably pro poor, but not really pro middle class. But given the fact that now you need both the people in the rural areas and in the urban areas to increase spending, possibly there is a change in thinking, and there could be some sops for the middle class that you could see coming.
But how does the government balance this? Because it would want to take pro-rural and pro-poor steps as well. That has been the highlight of this government. As you correctly mentioned, it would want to reach out to the middle class because there is building anger as far as the economy is concerned. And it cannot afford to antagonize the corporate sector because it had to roll back a lot of decisions it took in the last budget. So how does it balance these three?
So in this year's budget, it's unlikely that there'll be anything much for the corporate sector. Probably a few tweaks here and there to improve the ease of doing business. But in terms of tax rates, there were going to be no more changes because the government thinks that they have made a big announcement in terms of the corporate tax cuts. So the corporates per se cannot be expecting anything more than that on the tax front. So there, the government will have probably a bit more fiscal space. But, there have been, senior government officials have talked about on how the government is looking at the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act to see if there can be a leeway that they can exploit. So, the FRBM Act and the report that the NK Singh committee had submitted had talked about how the government could deviate from the fiscal deficit targets by 0.5% in terms of, if there is some kind of and there is some kind of economic problem. So probably the government will use that leeway and move to a 3.8% fiscal deficit number for GDP and do that the same for next year also, where they have to bring down the fiscal deficit from 3.3 to 3%. So probably they will use this, provision in the budget and talk about how this is a difficult year for the economy, and there is a need for the government to actually increase spending rather than cut down on spending, and use this leeway to, bring in fiscal stimulus measures in the budget.
Right.
So it's very much a possibility that route could be used, and it is something that the government is considering.
Right. Well, bad news for the Indian economy all around, and as Ramya pointed out, this is going to be a tightrope walk for the Modi government as far as the coming union budget is concerned. But as I mentioned earlier, there have been attempts by this government to divert attention from the economy, but I think it's important to bring back focus to what really matters, which is the economy. Thank you so much for watching Government Matters. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel.